Hello, I'm Anthony. Today I'm going to share with you my 5 favourite VST plugins. These are the ones that I use most often, and I use them the most often because I find them the most creatively inspirational. When we discuss each one, I'm going to show you how I use it, because a lot of the problems with modern VSTs is that they do so many things that you can be really overwhelmed, and kind of constraining yourself creatively, I think, is a really important part of the process. Just before we start, I'll say that I haven't ordered these 5 plugins in terms of preference, except that I've left my favourite. I do have a single favourite VST plugin. I'm going to talk about that at the end. But without further ado, here's number 1, Kontakt by Native Instruments. And not just Kontakt. The important thing to bear in mind with Kontakt is that it's just a sampler. So it's kind of pointless describing it as your favourite VST unless you put that in some sort of context. Let's have a very quick look at my library manager, and this isn't some sort of sick flex. It's basically talking about how much of Kontakt I ignore at any given time. I'm basically disregarding well over half of my Kontakt library. All of these blank boxes down here are the modules that aren't currently in use. If I enable one of them, it'll pop up in the browser on the left-hand side. The list of stuff that I do use, as I scroll down, you can see far more than half of everything that I have available isn't in use. For the most part, I use Kontakt in 2 very specific senses. The first is as my primary source of world instruments. The 5 libraries here labelled Spotlight Connection from India down to East Asia are an essential source of percussion for me these days. Most of the sounds in these collections are exotic to my ears because I'm not as used to hearing them as your more traditional drum kit. So when I'm looking for something to spark my creative juices as quickly as possible, a sound like this is exactly where I want to be. That is the sweet spot. And this is the case with these Spotlight collections. They pretty much never fail to impress and delight me. I've done Google searches and wikis on many of these instruments, and I find the whole subject of world percussion just a really fascinating thing. But at the end of the day, it's all about the sounds. And these Kontakt sounds are magnificent. So that's my first of 2 primary uses for Kontakt. The second is bowed instruments. These happen to be the libraries I've gravitated towards, and a large part of it is getting to understand the interface. Where are your articulations? How do you actually make the instrument sound somewhere approaching decent? I've actually done a video on articulations in Kontakt, and I think I can't remember if it was the violins or the cello, as an example of how to switch easily between legato, staccato, marcato, all of these various different ways to play a bowed instrument. It's quite a difficult thing to emulate. Kontakt does it particularly well. So not only are the sounds fantastic, but it's really easy to access all of the articulations. To come up with something, again, I'm all about creative inspiration. Just get me to writing music as quickly as possible and take all of the unnecessary fluff away. I don't want to be overwhelmed with multitudes of options. Just give me the best ones. And Kontakt allows you to configure like a bank of preset articulations and sounds that are just going to get you there as quickly as possible. So once again, I'm picking a very small section of Kontakt's vast library and saying that's what you do really well, that's what I'm going to use you predominantly for. Just before we move on from Kontakt, there is one other small use case I might as well mention while I'm here. Sometimes you find a library that just sounds so great, you think, I'm going to find an excuse to use you somehow. And the Damage library is a good example of that. This is for your kind of 9-inch nails, industrial, brutal sound. That kind of thing. Just bank upon bank of like ridiculous, crazy, violent, aggressive sounds. If I want that kind of thing in the music, I jump straight to Damage because I know that I'm going to be able to pick one of these instruments, throw it in, and pretty much any key on the keyboard is going to impress me. Once again, it's all about finding inspiration. The second plugin on my list, I happen to have chosen the Roland instance of the Jupiter 8 here. I could have picked Arturia and do a similarly very good instance of the Jupiter 8, but at the moment I'm actually enjoying the pure authenticity of using Roland's own instruments. They've done a series called the Legendary series. They're available either on the Roland Cloud, or you can individually buy them. I tend to cycle my subscription of the Roland Cloud, so I'll use it for a year or two and wallow in the glorious sounds, and then I'll basically put it down and write projects that doesn't use the Roland Cloud. So I don't have a perpetual subscription, but at the moment I am subscribed to it and I'm loving using the Jupiter 8. The Jupiter 8's kind of a placeholder for classic analog synths. It just happens to be my favourite and I think the best, because it's almost impossible to make it sound bad. What I've done here is, as a very simple demonstration, I've set up a C major chord in the background so that I don't have to keep the keys held down. And I'm just going to run this arpeggiated sequence playing a broken up C major chord and just play with the controls on the Jupiter 8, because almost everything, almost always, sounds absolutely fantastic. See what I mean? Absolutely sublime. What a bunch of geniuses work for Roland. And throughout the 70s and 80s, when they were just effectively incapable of doing wrong, they wrote this, they created this sequence of synthesizers that were just absolutely peerless. And the Jupiter 8, I think, stands at the top of the pile. So although it's representative, I do think it is actually the best polyphonic analog synthesizer you can get. And either the Arturia or the Roland Cloud emulation will do you fine. I have a lot of respect for a synthesizer manufacturer that can choose a set of options to provide you and not too tightly constrain the type of music that you can create with that subset of choices. That's what Roland do fantastically well. Number 3 on my list is Steinberg's Groove Agent. I have a love-hate relationship with Groove Agent because I really hate the interface. I think it's clunky and horrible and unwieldy and far too complicated. But if you're prepared to go through the torture of figuring out how to use this thing, and a few years ago I created a very long series of videos, a tutorial series describing how to use this thing. If you can overcome that hurdle, the power at your fingertips is absolutely limitless. And to boot, you get to understand a subset of features that are actually very creative and very intuitive. So for instance, at the moment I've got an acoustic kit loaded. If I get this thing running in the background, acoustic kits have this this feature called styles, which is basically a curated collection of grooves that, as you can see, it's currently playing a main groove, but it's also adding in a fill every 4th bar, and you can change the type of fill that you want to hear. This will actually get cut on the next time around, not this one. So you can come up with basically pre-built rhythms that are actually really easy to interact with. There's fill number 5. You can change the main style of groove very easily by introducing complexity. There are typically 16 different complexities for every main rhythm. Ooh. That's very different down there, isn't it? So a very intuitive interface hidden inside a very unintuitive interface. I'm a big fan of Groove Agent styles and use them a lot. And once you understand how this interface actually works, it is actually very easy to use. It just looks overwhelming initially. My favorite acoustic agent expansion inside Groove Agent is called The Kit, which is an awful name, but it's a great drum sound. If we have a look over at the instrument itself, so these are all the kit pieces in the kit. And it all sounds great. If you want a live drum sound, this is my VST of choice, and it's very, very powerful. That's not the end of the story with Groove Agent though, because it also does sample-based kits. Sample-based sounds use a different engine. This time it's called Beat Agent rather than Acoustic Agent. So these are basically two flavors of engine that live inside the umbrella of Groove Agent. Something that you'll very often find with sample-based kit sounds is that they have harmonic content, and it's very easy in Groove Agent to remove that harmonic content, leaving you with the more rhythmic based stuff. So in this particular pattern, for example, let's say I want to get rid of that bass line, I can jump over to the instrument view, and it's pretty easy for me to find the bass sound. I just mute it. So I've got the rest of the pattern, which I'm perfectly happy with. So it's very easy to jump between pattern mode and instrument mode, access each of the individual sounds. I could, if I wanted to, drag different samples onto these pads and very quickly manipulate these patterns. Initially, you have absolutely no idea how to use Groove Agent. You need somebody, to explain how the system works, how the plugin works. But once you understand it, if you're prepared to put in the legwork, Groove Agent does reward you. It's very, very powerful. Sounds fantastic, really flexible, and once again, just really quick to get going with creative inspiration. The number of plugins, the number of different drum libraries that you can get is very large. I own a few, but by no means all of them. Every single one of these gives you something really interesting to go at. Fourth on the list is the Arturia Modular V. So this is an emulation of the Moog modular system from the late 60s, early 70s. And this is my playground if I want to get really nerdy, if I want to do genuine sound construction, because you do eventually get to the stage where you load a patch and you can basically like take a step back and see effectively how the sound is constructed. So this preset that I've selected here, for instance, I'm seeing a bank of oscillators grouped together over here and feeding into a filter, which is then heading off to my left-hand channel. I can also see that there's a second group of oscillators that have been gathered together here. They're feeding into a different filter and off to the right-hand channel. I mean, the preset's called double sequence, but I can actually see that stereo nature of the sequence. I can see that there are envelopes feeding in as modulators to the low-pass filter. So as you learn how this thing works, and the world of modular synthesis is just a very great delight, and I love playing with modular synths inherently. But the thing with the Modular V is that it gives you some fantastic presets that are effectively learning tools. Once again, I've done a video series on this, and at the end of that series, I did some preset deep dives where I demonstrated how to figure out how the instrument works from the perspective of the preset. Let's have a quick listen to this preset. So what have I done? I've got single notes, a C and a G modulating in the background. The rest of it is coming from a sequence inside the modular. Here's my sequencer module. Look at this status light telling you what notes being played. And we've got our left-hand channel coming out of this filter. Sorry, right-hand channel did I say? Should have said. And here's the left-hand channel. Got a noise module over here feeding into one of the... there it is. Dial that back down again. So I can play with that. I can really interact with that sound in a kind of modular wall environment where I can create performances by multiple instances of the modular V that are just running constantly. And by playing with all the controls and learning how the sound works, you just build beautiful palettes of sound. So this is a really kind of inherently creative instrument. The thing itself, every single one of these controls is kind of guiding you towards a really deep and technical understanding of how music all hangs together, because fundamentally the individual building blocks of sound here are very, very straightforward. It's how you plug them all together that really generates the great sound, and there's nothing better than the Moog Modular for creating fantastic sounds out of very, very simple components. And finally, we come to the daddy. The best VST plugin of all time, not even close, is Spectrasonics Omnisphere. This thing it's just insane. To be absolutely honest with you, with the exception of rhythm, which it doesn't do particularly well, as far as harmonic or melodic content is concerned, you could just buy Omnisphere and never really want for anything. When I'm writing music, I quite often deliberately prevent myself from using Omnisphere because it almost seems too easy. The quality of the sounds on average in this thing is beyond compare, and the vast, vast size of its library, you could never come remotely close to using a tenth of the sounds in Omnisphere. And actually that's a large part of how I use it, because what I'll very often do at the beginning of a project, if I'm looking for something to kind of spark my imagination, is drop into maybe pads and strings or one of the synth options, press the randomize button and just pick something. And I know it's going to sound great, because pretty much everything does. Let's try another one. Let's just scroll down a bit and just, what have we got here? As expected, sounds just as good as I knew it would without ever playing a note before. One thing to mention about Omnisphere, by the way, if you're thinking about investing in the Omnisphere, which is a pretty expensive plugin, to be absolutely honest with you, it's really three components in one, because the Omnisphere central engine is fabulous, but you have two additional plugins called Keyscape and Trillion, and they combine inside Omnisphere to make one completely glorious whole. So a very quick look at each of those. If I go to the keyboards section, if I sort by rating actually, it'll get to my favorite piano, which is this one. So now the user interface is switched into Keyscape mode. If you installed Keyscape as a separate plugin, which you can, then this is what you would see, but it also integrates perfectly inside Omnisphere. So now I have a grand piano. I can, however, close down the Keyscape interface, revealing the full power of the Omnisphere engine, and then I've got all of my modulation options here, effects, etc., that I could apply to that piano sound. Similarly with the bass instruments, the bass plugin is called, or the bass component, Trillion, has an interface that looks like this. And you can install Trillion as a separate component, but inside Omnisphere, you get all of the Trillion goodness and all of the Omnisphere goodness. Occasionally you will see sale offers online. It's just one of those things for keeping your eye out for. Omnisphere plus Keyscape and Trillion in one bundle. You basically get everything in one. But once you own it, and you're never going to look back. This is my favorite VST of all time, and if I could only have one, this would be the one that I would choose. And that's us done. Hope you enjoyed this video today. Please hit like if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more of my content. I'll see you again. Thanks very much.